But yeah, dude, we had to have the cacao.
Thank you for that.
Had to open up the hearts.
Yes.
I love how you knew that too.
Heck yeah. I'm locked in. I'm right there with you.
When did you discover that, or what was your introduction to cacao?
So, well, my introduction to cacao is it's gonna blow your mind
Okay,
probably.
all right.
I was a chocolatier in college. Mind blown. So I actually my whole like professional career started off with food. I went to culinary school in New York when I was 18, and it was because I wanted to pursue arts and entertainment, but I didn't really have a way to pursue it. And I had been exposed to food, and I thought food's a great way to get to New York. That's really what it was for me. It was like I want to get to New York. I want to like see the world, and I want to experience art and culture and just understand like what makes things really happen. You know, like it seems like fashion people love great food and movie directors love great fashion. And like I was like, all of these people that are creating these amazing things that I'm inspired by, they all like the same stuff. And one thing that seemed to like get you into the room was like if you can cook great food. And so it just felt like a safe bet to me. That was like, this is also like my 17, 18-year-old mindset, you know, like trying to leave Montana where I'm from. Like, how do I get out of here? And so I pursued food, and I had been working for a chocolatier in Montana who had gone to the same culinary school that I was about to go to. And I ended up dropping out of culinary school after a year and being like, okay, I don't want to be a chef. That's not like who I want to be. But I did have like moderate chops, like I could kind of hang. And so I was able to work in restaurants and in kitchens afterwards. So I went right back to Montana, ended up working for that same chocolatier for years. So I would make 400 to 800 chocolate bars a day by hand, you know, like literally handmade chocolate bars, handmade truffles. And I did that all through college. It was a big part of my income.
One, I had no idea that
It's so unexpected.
I had no idea that was part of your story, part of what you did. Two, I didn't know like a chocolatier was a thing. I've never even heard that term before.
I've seen Willy Wonka. This is a real like no one told me about this career in college, like in high school at one of the career fairs. Like, yeah, it's a real thing.
Did you get fat working as a chocolatier?
No, but I definitely did not have good skin. I had some. I mean, I ate so much chocolate. Like it's funny because even now I view chocolate as this. Like, I really love like cacao now. So coming full circle back to how did I learn about this? I learned a lot about chocolate and how it's made and cacao, and I've always been very fascinated with it, and I've been very interested in sourcing and the process and all that stuff. And it wasn't until I started to have this transformation into health and wellness a few years ago that I dove into cacao as a modality for health. And that's when I learned like, wow, this is a heart opener and it's like actually really good for you. And there's some really like sacred practices that go with it. And then that was a mind blown moment for me where I was like, all this time I've been looking at it as confection or candy or like this sweet treat, this delectable, you know, sin that you have to do or that you eat, right? And it's actually like medicine for your body. And like so many things, we love to tamp down the medicine with sugar and like the things that aren't great for us. And I'm not hating on like sweet chocolate. I love it too. But it's actually medicine and people aren't really educated on that. And that was just like, whoa. So that's kind of my whole like I'm into all the things now. Like all the culinary food as medicine, not so much as like, you know, a proper art form, but like really as like nutrition and a healing source.
Yeah. How have you changed your relationship with food over the years from going from a place of working as a chocolatier, eating a ton of that stuff, not really viewing food as like information or, you know, fuel and what it can do for the body, what can it do for the brain, what it can do for the way that you live your life. So what was your shift and transition into this, you know, new world of how you see food?
Yeah, I think I've been through multiple shifts, and for a long time I was in just food is fuel. It doesn't need to taste good. Like for a while I was in that like bodybuilder mindset of, not that I'm a bodybuilder, but I was in that kind of consumption behavior of like I eat the same thing every day and this works for me and this keeps muscle on my body and I look good and feel good and this is it, you know? And that was a pretty big chapter of my life. And then I would say probably in the last year, really, maybe year and a half, I've started to jump back into like the art side of it, culinary arts, and be like, okay, there's actually like you can take all of these things that we love. Like I've been on a big taco kick lately, and like learning like traditional.
You're in the right
Yeah,
place for
I know
that.
I'm in the perfect place for it. But like taking these traditional recipes or processes and then making them a little bit healthier. And so I've been super interested in that. And I'm sort of getting back into the idea of the production of cooking. Like I really love cooking when it's a show. Like
Mm.
that's the other thing that I learned about myself through the whole culinary arts process is it wasn't so much I think the love of food for me. Like I truthfully could eat like spaghetti and meatballs every single day. I could eat like the same thing every single day and probably never get sick of it. It doesn't really I don't need a lot of variety. Um but I love the showmanship of cooking. I love the process of like, I'm gonna take all of these things, I'm gonna break them down, I'm gonna, amalgamate them and cook them and bring them all together, and these flavors are gonna bloom, and then I'm gonna show it to everyone and present it, and everyone's gonna be entertained and fully invested in this present moment. I love that, and I think that piece is was translates to my career everywhere else outside of food is like that showmanship piece of like bringing all of these things together for this moment, that a shared moment.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I'm still kind of in the middle of the journey right now, and I've got a friend who's exploring the restaurant space, and I'm like, do I dip a toe again? Like, am I going to get back into this? I don't know. It's been really fun to cook with him and other people, and just start to take on a more thoughtful approach to food that I sort of abandoned because I abandoned it because I'm like, it's not healthy, and I'm not gonna, I don't really care about the culinary arts anymore. But truthfully, I do care a little bit. Still in there.
Dude, it's really interesting to hear you talk about that and the showmanship, the culture, bringing people together over certain things, and immediately just makes me think about like what you do in your day to day. It's like you are a community builder. Like you bring people together, you empower people. I think back to at Running Man, you being there and just bringing people together and going through that yoga flow and the breath work, and it was really powerful. So hearing you talk about the way that the reason that you love food, it also is the same thing with bringing people together for a shared experience that's going to elevate their human experience
Totally.
as well. So, have you always been this community builder, this facilitator? Because the way that I saw you on stage and the way that I saw you carry yourself, both at the event that we were at in New York and the event we were at in Atlanta, you were just so like calm and cool and comfortable and open and inviting,
I appreciate
and
that.
it was amazing to see. So where does that side begin for you?
Yeah, it is really interesting. I think I've always been this person who I think I always wanted to fit in when I was younger, and that drove like, I think it's always like a nature versus nurture thing, right? Like, I think I wanted to fit in. I was homeschooled. I grew up in Montana. Like, I didn't have a what you call a typical childhood. I had a great childhood, and I love my parents, and I'm very happy with the way things worked out. But I definitely had an atypical upbringing, and I I very much felt like in college that I needed to catch up or compensate for lost time, and that led to a lot of behaviors of like me throwing parties and me being like very much a community builder, but not in a healthy community sense. Like I was most likely to like throw a kegger out in the woods or like do something crazy at a party, like create a huge moment, like a huge scene that everyone's like, this is out of control. Like I loved that. And what it really was one, I think I wanted to belong. And then as I grew out of that and didn't feel that need to belong anymore, I really loved the feeling of everyone having a collective concentration. Like when you're all focused on something, like in a moment, it's like, whoa, that feeling is really powerful. And selfishly, I enjoy the feeling if I create that and people are enjoying themselves. It's like so fulfilling for me. I'm like, wow, like that. People love this. Like I'm giving people this experience. Like I'm so full. I'm beaming. Um, but I also love it that it might open the door for someone to get into something that's good for them, like health and wellness. So my whole approach this last couple of years has been like, let's make wellness fun. Like I threw pool parties. I worked with, hip hop artists and country artists. And I toured the country for years, working with alcohol brands, doing tours and crazy pool parties and all that kind of stuff in Los Angeles, all across the country. And I would do those parties. I would feel amazing and I'd be like on top of the world. And then the next day I'd sober up and I'd be really depressed. And I'd be like, man, I'm really sad now. Like, and you kind of chase that moment over and over again. And it's really depleting on your mental health, your spiritual health. And it's ultimately kind of vapid because you're like creating this party high that you can never really get back. You can kind of step back into it, but it just totally drains you. And as I transformed my life and I quit drinking and I got healthy, I was like, man, it'd be so cool to like that feeling you get like at the peak of the party, if you could do that like just in health and wellness. And it's just like people aren't inebriated, people aren't messed up, and they're able to just like be at that energy, like, yeah, we're doing this thing. And that's kind of where the aha moment happened of like, I should do this with ice baths. And that's really where this all started. So yeah, I've always wanted to do experiences and get people together and like have a collective moment. Like I'm definitely like the planner in the group where I'm like, yeah, we're gonna do this crazy thing. I got a little Easter egg for us. I got a little surprise. Um, but yeah, I really love bringing people together and then creating a shared experience where everyone's bought in on it.
Yeah, I remember when I first started following your content, it was doing a lot of these experiences out in LA.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you were working with Plunge at the time.
No,
But when I was later like, oh, Dom works for Plunge now. Like that makes that makes sense.
it was so perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, so much alignment there. But how did you make the shift from being in the party scene, working with these artists and these musicians and things like that? Like you said, going to these pool parties, drinking, masking reality for a while for
Years.
years.
Yeah.
What was the turning point for you, and how did you transition out of that world and into the world of health and wellness?
Totally. Yeah. So I spent 5-6 years touring, basically working in the experiential industry where you're basically creating experiences for brands, hoping to connect with consumers, trying to create like a lasting impression, a great memory. Um, and I worked in-house at a brand. I worked at agencies. So I had a lot of different experiences and I learned a lot about kind of the psychology behind marketing alcohol through experiences and creating occasion or creating ritual. And in 2019, I was working for Modelo in Mexico. Basically, they're Mexican branch of the beer company, so Cerveza Modelo. And the creative that myself and my teammates came up with beat out 6 Mexican agencies. And we were like, we tapped in on something good. And at the core of this whole creative was this idea of transformation, the transformation of grain when it's just, the dried out, basically grain that you harvest, and then you roast it and it becomes malt and it turns into this beautiful thing that's like the base of beer. And this idea of transformation and like the process of heating this thing up and the flavors that come out, it led down this whole creative path of like, we got to create this experience that's all about transformation. And we built this concept around transformation and beer at the center of it, beer and food at the center of it, kind of like a food festival. And it's crazy because that was literally like the transformation from me exiting the the industry and into my own health and wellness. Cause I was like, man, like this is really powerful stuff. Like I'm talking about like this moment where we like would write down our intentions and throw it in the fire and like all of these really cool things. And I'm like, man, this is all like really powerful stuff that could change someone's life if they weren't like actually inebriated, And that was sort of like the first little like ding for me. 2020 rolls around and I quit drinking. I was like, I'm gonna just take a break from alcohol. So I took like 4 or 5 months off. I think it was like 4.5 months off and got really fit. And my body responded so well to not having alcohol because I'd done dry stints before. And I never saw myself as a person with a problem. It was just my lifestyle was to go drink a lot. And my body responded so well. And I was like, man, I feel really good. Like this is something. But another thing happened. And that other thing that happened was I really had some like underlying depression that I'd been masking for years and years and years. And I had a lot of emotional issues and some spiritual grief that I just had never dealt with. And alcohol was this nice little fog over the whole thing, right? It was just this layer of fog. And I didn't really see through that. Sobering up for months on end, it really presented itself. And I didn't have the tools to navigate it at all. Like I really didn't. And I got really depressed, and I got depressed to the point that I wanted to end my life. There's a lot of insinuating factors that happen. Like, this is when the pandemic is going on. So my whole career, my whole identity and lifestyle had sort of ended. There's no more parties when you're when you're in a pandemic. And I really did not know who I was. And I felt like I had basically wasted my entire 20s. Like I had just partied my 20s away. And I was very broke. I had to move in with my parents at 31. And my relationship had failed. My little startup that I had started, a supplement company, that had failed. And I felt on every sense that I was a failure and that there was really no point in carrying on. I had zero hope. And in that whole process of me like learning about transformation, what I didn't realize was that was the fire phase. That was the phase of me going through the fire. And that was the make or break point where I had a decision, either tap out or like check in. And I had this ability to check in, like, okay, I'm not going to tap out. I'm going to check in, and I'm going to commit to life no matter how hard it gets, no matter how painful it is, no matter how, embarrassed I am or, feeling like I'm not enough. I'm just going to keep going because maybe it will get better. And it did get better. And then all of those experiences in my 20s all sort of accumulated, and it was like all I could pull from all this information and all these things I had done and be like, all right, now let's do something good with this. Like, let's do something that like makes people feel like they belong. And that was the thing I realized is like I'd done all these parties and I'd done all this stuff and I'd met thousands of people, and I had a great time with thousands of people, and I couldn't call any of them and be like, hey, I'm down. Man, that's the industry. Like that's the reality that most people feel. Is like, I know all these people, but I'm not connected to them. So I'm like, what if we just created these experiences where like community actually like exists, and you really are welcome and you really are special. And if you're not there, someone's gonna be like, yo, where were you? And it's gonna be like that kind of friendship. And that got me fired up. And then one thing led to the next thing. And, now here I am with Plunge, and I feel like we're actually creating that. But yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but.
No, what I'm hearing too is, and like, what I'm seeing here is a really cool pattern of when you follow something that you're passionate about, or when you lean into what you're really good at or what fills you up, then other opportunities come about in spite of that. Like,
for sure,
you're now working with Plunge, which is an incredible company. You're able to travel around and do all these amazing events. Like we've got to hang out a couple times and, gone from internet friends to IRL friends. But I think today people are very much like, they see online these like people who are doing like, creators, influencers, community builders, whatever else. And they're like, man, like, I wish I could have that. And then I've talked to these people, and I asked them like, well, what are you passionate about? Like, what excites you? What lights you up? And they're like, I don't know. And
yeah, I've experienced that.
It's like, what do you like? Do you believe that? Do you believe that people actually don't have things that they're passionate about, or is there something blocking them from really tapping into that thing that they have to offer to the world?
It's a great question. I think it's a permission thing, probably.
Oh,
I think it's a permission thing. Like I think a lot of people would be really passionate about stuff that they just don't want to allow themselves to be like to say, I'm really passionate about this. Like you might be really passionate about something that's kind of weird, super niche, no one cares about, there's no money in it, and that might light you up, and that's great. Like you can do that. I think a lot of people also say that they don't know like what they're passionate about because they haven't allowed themselves to really fully like feel and be present. Like there's a present feeling when you're doing anything you're in flow, anything like where you're truly in the moment, and you're creating in the moment, or you're, whether that could be skiing, that could be writing, that could be poetry, it could be creating something, woodwork. Like there's all kinds of things where you just get into this flow state. And I think people don't explore enough. You got to explore a ton of things. And if you don't know, then your job is to explore full time until you know. And then be like, okay, I can kind of loop the patterns and be like, I like building things with my hands, or I like writing and communicating with people. I like connecting with people. There's these moments of genius that we all have. And I think people get a little bit stuck. Like, I don't know what my thing is. Like, your thing may not be one thing. It might be like that you have to just try a ton of stuff. And eventually the mastery will show up. You'll find the thing that, like, wow, I got to just do more of that. And obsession will show up. And then the obsession will lead to mastery, and then on and on and on. That's kind of how I see it.
Was there anything that you tried and failed at, but it made you pivot towards a path that was more aligned?
Supplement companies. Twice.
2.
Yeah, twice. I co-founded a supplement company in 2019, and it was someone else's concept, and her idea was amazing. And we were doing CBD and nootropics and adaptogens. We were early on that. And this, mind you, this is like, I'm still kind of a party boy, but I'm exiting the party scene. Like, I was on tour with Dirk Bentley for 9 months while building this. And so, like, I'm like doing adaptogens, doing cold showers in the morning, and then getting hammered at Whiskey Row after the show. Like, so it was like this constant loop of like, I'm good, I'm not so good. I'm good, I'm not so good. And that business didn't work out. We were a little early. We were too late on the hemp side, the CBD side. We were too early on the nootropic adaptogen side. And we weren't really packaged in a way that made sense for the consumer. And I know this all now because I've done so much CPG consulting since then, and like I've been in it. But at the time, I was just like, why isn't this working? And we were too early. The next one was I joined a brand that was doing adaptogen-based pre-workouts. And the idea was everything was stackable, so you could combine the 4 products all in one, and you would never go over a daily recommended dose of caffeine or stimulants. So basically, you could compartmentalize it. You could take them all together for like a pretty hefty dose of caffeine, 400 milligrams, or you could break them up based on, your specific needs. So like there's a pre-workout, there's a nootropic focus, there's a pump, and then there's a fat burner. Really cool concept. Again, a little too cerebral, and you give people too many options and they won't buy it. And when that company ended, I was at a turning point. I'd not had financial stability for a couple of years at that point. And I was like, okay, I have like a little bit of money to do something, and I got to figure out what I'm going to do. And I was like, I'm going to start my own supplement company now. It's just me, no one else. I'm going all in. And I had this idea of doing like a nootropic greens product, and it tasted terrible. It was so bad. Like, it was so bad. And my idea was like, you're going to drink this, then you're going to do an ice bath, and then you're going to feel amazing. And I'm going to get everyone to drink my product by doing ice baths with them. And so I would have friends over to my house, and we would do these workouts, these community workouts. They come over to my house, they'd slam the drink, just like choke it down, like, oh God, I can't do this, And then I'd be like, get in the ice bath. We're doing a Wim Hof, get in the ice bath. And people loved the whole experience minus the drink. And what I realized was like, nobody really wants this green stuff. Everybody wants to do more ice baths. And that's where the whole, I started my company called Twin, Take What You Need. And Take What You Need was going to be a supplement company. The name really makes sense, right?
Yeah.
For a supplement. And it doesn't make so much sense for an ice bath, but I'd already like started the branding and the name, so I had to keep going with it. And the pivot there was, okay, I'm like, supplements aren't my thing, clearly. Experiences are my thing, clearly. Let's do ice baths now and like get it out there. And so I started doing just tons of ice bath events in Los Angeles. And at the time, I was the only person doing it. I was the only person doing like an experience like that.
So were you able to profit off of these experiences that you were doing, or was it more so just creating the experience?
I would make money when I would do brand integrations. So, and I got really lucky. Like, I got crazy lucky. Someone from Aloe saw one of the events that I was at where I was losing money and was like, hey, would you want to do this with Aloe? And I was like, yeah, I would love to do that with Aloe. Like, are you kidding me? And that led to the next thing. And then equinox activation. So like it built up. But it'd be kind of like for every 4 events, like 1 event I'd make money and 3 events I would break even or lose money.
Mm.
But it was really important to me to show up and do volume. And I've talked to some friends about this recently. Like my strategy, and this is a good strategy for content, entrepreneurship, if you're launching a CPG brand, whatever, just do volume of whatever you're doing. Like just get it out there. And so people, it's noisy. People aren't going to remember what you're doing. So just create volume of whatever it is. Like if it's content, if it's a product, if it's an experience, just do it a ton. And then you can kind of niche down a little bit and be like, all right, we're not doing it for free anymore. We're not doing so much of it. We're going to do a little bit less and we're going to be a little bit more thoughtful. And then you can kind of niche down again and again. And eventually you'll have a very bespoke thing that's like really good. And it's now valuable enough that people will pay for it and be like, I want to do that thing with you, or, I want that product because it is so good. And I think the best way to get there is just like volume and then sort of work your way down. So I was like just doing tons of events and losing money left and right and working like myself like a dog. And towards the end, it started to pick up. And finally, like over the course of like 7 months, it went from the ice bath guy to like people would call me about my company and be like, hey, I love what Twin's doing. People would treat me as if I was a brand within about 7 months. And I was like, wow. But that's because I did so many events. I was doing like 3 to 4 events a month. And it was just like nonstop.
Yeah, dude, events are no joke. Like getting into that space now myself too.
Yeah.
It is a lot doing 2 to 3. So I can imagine, 3 to 4 would have been an absolute grind.
I did 48 last year. So in 2023, I did 48 events. And I also was out for 7 weeks with heart surgery. So when you break it down, it was like a relentless pace. But like that was the energy that I was in last year, was like this relentless, like I'm going to just see how far I can go with this thing, not compromising my health in the process, but like, can I do it? Yeah, I can do it. And it was like, I saw myself as like the endurance athlete of throwing events. Like,
I love that so much.
Can I do it? How many of these can I put on?
How far can you keep going?
Right, exactly. And also still show up with a smile and still be like a person who can like actually have conversations.
Right, because it's one thing just to host the event. It's a completely another thing to show up with that kind of energy and to actually create the experience, because people are going to feed off of the energy that you bring. So if you're upbeat, if you're energized, if you're passionate about it, they're going to feed off of that.
Yeah.
Versus like, okay, yep, I'm just doing it just to check the box off.
Yeah. Don't do it. Yeah, if you're just doing it to check the box, don't even do it.
Well, I feel like that becomes the same thing with exercise. And I mean, you brought up like being the endurance athlete of throwing events.
Yeah.
Like there was points in 2023 where I was burning the candle at both ends from a health standpoint. And it was like, for what?
You were going hard too, because you were traveling, you were going to races, you were promoting races, you're speaking. So it's like, and you were working on multiple fronts. You're also creating content. I mean, you were doing a lot, I feel like, at once, I was impressed because I saw the pace and I was like, dang, that's aggressive, but I like it.
Thank you. I got to the point, I think, and we're going to get into it, but after I had the cardiac arrest, it was very much like a pause. It's like pause, reevaluate. When you can't push forward, like when you physically can't go anymore, it forces you to take a step back and think about, okay, what have I been doing? Why have I been doing it?
Yeah.
Is it serving me? Have my relationships been, so like for me, it was like some relationships have been suffering, mental health have been suffering, like aspects of work have been suffering, just overall quality of life had been suffering. And from the outside, it's like everything looks great.
Yeah.
Like Dom's going and he's traveling and he's doing these races and he's meeting with these people and he's doing all this. Behind the scenes, it's like you don't see the nights staying up till midnight, 1 a.m. to finish editing a video, and then you got to wake up at 5, 6 a.m. to get up and go for a run the next day, and then you got to hop on calls and plan events and send emails and do all the things, which again, love being in that season of grind, but it's not a sustainable thing. Like you think about the best marathon runners in the world, Kipchoge runs 2 races a year.
Right.
You know, he's
Right.
hyper fixated on those 2 training blocks that he's in. And most of the other part of the year is he's letting his body, his mind, his soul recover
Mm-hmm.
so that he can show up as his best. And so it's really for me looking at my life in terms of seasons.
Love that.
And I am curious now, if that was your season in 2023, what does your season of 2024 look like?
Yeah. Great. I love the way you break that down. I feel very similar, and I sort of looked at it like that too. Coming out of the heart surgery, for me, it was I wanted to prove to myself that I could do this, and I also really believe that it was a window of time. You know, like Rick Rubin has talked about that when you listen to these recent podcasts of him. Like when you have an idea, now is the time that idea needs to exist. And I also really believe that when you have that inspiration or that calling or that fire, whatever you want to call it, that makes you want to do something kind of crazy, there's probably a limited time where it will have the maximum impact that it could have.
Mm.
So, and I've now personally seen this a couple times, and I've lived it through with this cold exposure. There was a time when ice bath events didn't exist in communities, like in workout communities. And now we're in a time where every gym is having an ice bath experience with their communities. That happened in less than 3 years. It just, poof, now everyone's doing it. And so I recognize that part of what I was trying to do, I think, and it was for myself, but it was also for other people, it was just do as much as I could while the interest was there before it becomes a thing that's no longer interesting or novel. And it's like, oh, it's like part of my routine. And I was like, man, there's an opportunity here to like make this really special right now and make it really transformative for people's lives. And that was a driver for me. That season was super crazy busy. This next season is going to be a lot more thoughtful. And this is sort of that idea of like do volume and then niche down. Now it's niching down a little bit, being more thoughtful about the events. And what I mean by that is, one, for the sake of the brand, for the health of the brand, doing things that make sense for the brand and are the right place where we have the right amount of people coming to see and experience the product, hopefully in a setting that is really attractive and fun and inclusive, but then also thoughtful in the sense of like doing a better and better job with the execution. Because to your point, when you're doing tons and tons and tons of events or anything that you're doing a lot of, quality will suffer because of the volume. It's really hard to do volume and quality. And so the ability to, in the beginning, volume's great because it gets you out there, and then you have to kind of pull back. And the last piece of that is when you're doing a ton of volume of anything, it's really hard to explore, which we just talked about, which is so important to like your evolution.
Mm.
And so your passions are always going to evolve and develop, but they can't if you're super busy working in the business. Like if you're in it all the time, then you can't work on it.
Mm.
And being part of working on it is that exploration and like, what's this new thing? And being curious and having enough space to experience things that are new and novel to you and exciting to you that you can then become passionate about.
Mm.
So that's kind of how I see it.
The concept of working in your business and on your business is something that I think about a lot.
Mm.
And much like you, I'm trying to be more intentional this year. I saw you made a post and just saying like, say no to casual things and say yes to bigger things that scare you.
Yeah.
Which I loved. I love that. Saying no is one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah.
Especially when you're going fast and things are exciting and you're trying to meet new people and build things. Like relationships are everything. So it's like you don't want to say no to everything, but if you start saying yes to everything, then I realize like, well, I haven't done what I needed to do. Like I haven't done what I said what I need to do, what I said I'm going to do over the past few days. Yeah, I've been having fun and I've been hanging out with people, and it's very easy to get distracted in a place like LA or here in Austin.
Sure.
So being intentional about that. But going back to the concept of working on your business versus in your business, do you think that same concept and principle can be applied to one's inner self,
Mm,
to working on one's self?
yeah. It's probably the opposite. It's probably the exact opposite though. Maybe
Mm,
not. But like you can work on your spiritual state, but but you have to be in your spiritual state. So it's
mm,
actually I think like it's almost a mirror. It's like the image is reversed. So like you can work in your business, right? And be incredibly busy and feel like you're making progress. And you probably are making some progress, but you're not working on the business and you're not polishing it and you're not necessarily guiding it to where it needs to go or it could go. On the other way around, it almost seems to me like the opposite spiritually, where you can be working on yourself spiritually, checking the boxes, going to church, reading your Bible, meditating, getting still, doing the breath work,
mm,
whatever the thing is, right? It could be all those things. But unless you're in it, like you're actually in it, feeling it, present, then all of those things that you're doing are just acts. They're all actions. They're not actually changing what's going on inside.
mm.
And last year, I did a 6-month coaching program last year, based on stillness, principles of stillness, and it was really interesting because it applied like biological ways and tools to get you still. So kind of tapping into um, the biology, the neurobiology behind stillness, and getting into different altered states. And the thing that I really realized was like you can't fake presence. You cannot fake presence. And this is so deep for me and so profound to me because I think the most incredible moments we all share are when we're present, like experientially. Like when you're really in the present moment, those are the best experiences. If you ask anybody about their last 3 vacations and what the best moments were, it's probably gonna be a moment when everyone was focused on one thing. Someone fell off the boat and it was hilarious, or the most insane tomahawk came out and it was flaming and the food was unreal and they're like, oh my God, can you believe it? Everyone's gonna have a moment where they were all present and that's gonna be their favorite moment
Mm.
where they weren't thinking about anything else and they were all together. You can't fake presence in your own personal spiritual life too, like the presence of God in your life.
Mm.
You can't fake that. You can act like you have this connection to God, whatever that means to you too. It doesn't, I'm not defining that anyway, but like whatever that connection is to God or the universe, you can't fake it. When you have it, there's a peace and a confidence that you have and a connection that's really powerful.
Mm. Have you always been spiritually tapped in?
I would say so. I would say so. It definitely it waned a lot. I've really been recently realizing a few things about my 20s. My 20s were really interesting to me just because of how much passion and energy I had,
Mm.
and also like how I still somewhat feel like it was very misplaced. Like, do I wish that I would have chosen to do all the things that I did? I wish I would have done it a little bit differently. I don't have regret in that. Like, I feel like I messed up or anything. But the thing that I've come back to is when you are around environments or people and you're taking substances that diminish that spiritual connection, it does have a big impact on your potential. No matter what like anyone says, I truly believe that it's up to you to fuel your body and your mind and surround yourself with people that will help you not just come to your career potential or your lifestyle potential, but that spiritual potential that you have. Because a lot of us have great spiritual potential if we would just slow down enough and tap in and check in with it, right? And listen and hear the whisper, right? Like God talks in whispers, and you can't hear that whisper if you're just got all the noise and all the things. So I've been spiritually tapped in for a long time, but it's been hard to hear in a lot of chapters of my life. And those are because of my choices.
Man, I want to dive into your heart a little
Yeah.
bit.
Let's go.
I want to dive into your heart a little bit.
Mm.
And, I paused there because I was just kind of getting a download and soaking in all that you said there. And for me, it just took me back to hearing you speak. It took me back to the times of when I was like kind of at my darkest or lowest
Mm.
points in my life. And it was when I thought I could do everything on my own. And it
Ooh.
was when I pushed aside what I knew I should be doing. And that was, you know, praying, meditating, reading the Bible, going to like, hanging around certain people who I knew were going to fill me up spiritually and help
Mhm.
me. But I wanted to mask that because I wanted to uphold some sort of status, or I wanted to be seen a
Yeah.
certain way, or hang out with a certain crew because, they were funny or they made me
Right.
laugh, or, they were a good time to be around. But like, were they actually challenging you in a way that is going to help with your growth? Like, no.
Mm.
And so it's just the reason that I like paused there for a second was like, man, like just it took me back to a certain state. But I do want to dive into what has happened over the past few years with your heart. Obviously, you and I both
Yeah,
share
right.
not just the same name,
Yeah, but
but
also some
some conditions
yeah.
with the old heart. And it was hilarious at Running Man actually, because they were like, are you Dom? Are you Dom, the one who had the heart problems? And it's like, yes,
Yeah.
but like it might be the other Dom who was at the heart.
Well, because I was shirtless for most of
Yeah,
Running Man,
yeah,
and I obviously have the big scar, from
yeah.
open
And I
heart
have like the
surgery.
one here too.
And so people would come up to me like, "Oh, you're Dom," and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yes." And we would be talking for a few minutes before I realized they thought I was you, and they just assumed that I was you because of the scar. And I answered yes, and it was so funny because they're like, "Oh, you're him," and
Yeah.
like we get to chatting, and they're like, "I emailed you about the thing," and I'm like, "You did?" Like I have no idea what you're talking about right now, and I'd be like, "Okay." Like, I don't remember that email. Do I know this guy? And like, turns out they've been having conversations with you, and man, we probably confused a lot of people out there.
Dude, so funny. So funny. But I was watching your reel earlier today again of you one day post-op having open heart surgery, beast in it, walking through the hallways in the
Oh
hospital.
man,
And then 6 months post-op, you're swinging kettlebells around, you're
yeah.
throwing weight around, had me all fired up. Talk to me about that.
Oh man. Well, I first off, I'm just really grateful to God that my surgery went as well as it did,
Mm.
and I recognize that I am living a privileged life in that I am healthy, I'm fully recovered, and I have no restrictions. And I understand there's a lot of people that go through heart conditions and heart, trials and situations, challenges where they aren't back to 100%. And so I really am trying to live in the daily present, like intention that like I'm going to be so grateful that I have this opportunity, and also know that like this may not last for the rest of my life. I hope it does. I hope that for the rest of my life, I have full potential and full capacity. But I'm so aware that this could go away at any point in time, which is also one of the drivers for me working as hard as I do and working so hard on the things that I'm passionate about, because I recognize that I may not always have this much energy or this ability to go as hard as I do. And it's a little counterintuitive. Like I've been chastised by friends and people like, "You're going so hard again. Like I just feel like you don't you take better care of your body." I'm like, "Yeah, I do." But I'm the endurance athlete of events. Like I know how to check in, and like right now I get to do this, and no one's gonna take that from me. Like I get to do this, and that's where I'm at.
Mm.
So going into the surgery, I'll give you the quick version. So it's not boring, but there's enough context.
Mhm.
The context is I was born with a heart condition, a bicuspid valve, meaning there's only two leaflets. There should be three. I had two on my aortic valve. So instead of having three, there's two leaflets. And those leaflets open and close and control blood flow. I had a repair when I was 3 months old where they basically cut out that leaflet because it wasn't formed properly. And that would allow blood to flow in and out of that valve. Miraculously, that leaflet had enough living tissue in it that it grew with my heart. And so they thought that I was going to have my surgeons and cardiologists as a child thought, "Oh, for sure he'll have a replacement within, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever." And so my entire childhood, I grew up being told like, "You're going to have to get this thing replaced. Like, just expect another heart surgery, like kind of priming me for that. I was so blessed. I made it into my 30s without having to have that surgery.
Wow.
So very lucky guy. In 2020, I was dealing with extreme depression to the point that I wasn't sure that I wanted to live anymore. I was pretty sure that I wanted to tap out. I made a conscious choice to not tap out and to commit to life no matter how hard it gets. It was just like this switch where I was like, I don't care what happens to me. I'm going to just prove that life is worth living to myself. No one else, just to myself. Because I think when I'm old, I'll be like, that was one heck of a ride. That was worth it. Even if there's heartbreak and you go broke and you're embarrassed about your state, like it'll be worth it in the end. That's what I told myself. I got really fit. I got mentally strong. I worked with a life coach, and he helped me build mental frameworks that changed my life that I'm still using today. I got physically so strong, the biggest, strongest I've ever been. I felt so good, so powerful. I was financially recovering from, the debt that I was in, and my business is failing and my work, just the disasters that I had kind of gone through. I was in a great place. And one day I was doing farmer's carries and I started to, black out a little bit. Like, whoa, what's that? Something was off. And I went and did a little leg workout and started getting incredibly dizzy. And then like a wave that hit me, I had this moment where I was like, I'm having a stroke. I'm like, maybe I'm having a heart attack. I can't breathe. And I remember walking across the gym trying to get to the front desk so that I could call an ambulance. I was like going to ask them to call an ambulance. And the whole room, it's like when you watch like a James Bond movie and someone gets drugged, it's like the whole room distorts. Like it was like that. And I remember like walking up and I grabbed the counter and I just stood there. And the guy working the counter goes, what do you need? And I just looked at him and I was like, I don't know. I don't know what I need. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to call an ambulance, but I feel like I need an ambulance. So I kind of gathered myself, went over to my bag. I just chewed up 2 aspirin. I was like, if I'm having a heart attack, this will keep me from dying, hopefully, and I'll figure out what's going on. And then I kind of recovered. My central nervous system recovered. And I went home. I slept for 14 hours straight. Woke up the next morning, still felt really off. Felt something was very wrong. Like everything was off. So I went and saw my cardiologist. And that visit to the cardiologist changed my life. Mind you, I've been with this cardiologist since I was a kid. So I've been dealing with this cardiologist since I was like 10 years old-ish, somewhere in there, 9 or 10. And so he's a friend, my entire life. This has been my sort of who you go to to check in and make sure that everything's going well. And I hadn't seen him in a few years. That was on me and my negligence. And I just knew something was off. He comes in to review my echocardiogram and all the tests. And he's gotten so much older. Now he's, he got white hair and he's this older man. And we're talking a little bit. He's like, I got some good news and some bad news. The good news is your valve is unchanged. You have moderate leakage in the valve, but you have an aneurysm in your aorta. And he drew a diagram of what that looks like. And I was like, how does this happen? Like, I didn't know this was a thing. He's like, yeah, there's about a 50% chance that someone with a bicuspid valve develops an aneurysm. Oh gosh, like, what does that mean? He's like, so what that means is this is life-threatening. You can't lift weights anymore. And I was just like, this whole identity that I just created, I really lost myself. I've been the party guy, been all that stuff. Now I'm this super healthy person. I'm doing breath work every day. I'm doing cold showers every single day. I'm mentally, spiritually aligned. I'm financially recovering. I am on this trajectory to success. And at the core of that is me being fit and strong. And he's telling me that I can't do this anymore. And I always say it was my Dallas Buyers Club moment. Like when he like ugly cries in the car, totally happened to me. Like I got out, like I kept it together kind of, and then got in the car and just sobbed. But he was like, yeah, like we need to get you a new cardiologist. This ends me being your doctor because this is so serious. You need a doctor that's closer to you. So it's like I'm saying goodbye to this old friend is what it felt like. And I'm like, this whole thing's happening where I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna have surgery. And they basically said, don't lift heavy weights. Don't really lift anything. No more than 40 pounds was the advisory. And they're like, we're going to watch it and see what happens. You'll probably have a surgery within a year. 1 year later, so that was in 2021. 1 year later, in April or May of 2022, I just started Twin, my ice bath as a service company, doing ice bath events all across Los Angeles, and wasn't doing great, wasn't recovering very well, was having some issues. I went in and they're like, hey, your valve is now failing. Your valve is showing signs that it's weakening and it's not going to get better. Well, you need to do surgery within the next 3 to 6 months. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I was really in the state of like, my whole strategy is volume events, work as hard as I can, show up, be everywhere, but also knowing like I have surgery coming up very soon. And it really mentally was challenging because each of those times that I heard the news about my heart, that dark voice of like, is it even worth it? Like, why are you even working hard? Like, what if it goes wrong? Like, what if you know, like that doubt, that voice to me, that's like the evil voice that's like telling you like you're not good enough, that you should just give up, that like it's not worth living. Like that's that dark, depressive thing that kind of shows up. That would show up each time, each of these visits. And it was like, man, this is like what I'm personally fighting against. And so I just kept rocking, kept doing events, I kept showing up. I really, really invested in into like what I was doing. And then Plunge came along. I joined Plunge and I was going to keep pushing it. And then it got worse and worse to the point that like I really couldn't breathe properly. Like I was having early stages of heart failure. And I was like, okay, I have to do this surgery. So I had the surgery in February of last year, almost 1 year ago. And in that surgery, they replaced my aneurysm and my valve. So I have new aortic root and a new valve. And I immediately started doing rehab the next day. And for me, it was like when you wake up, you're like, wow, now I get to do this all over again. That whole I get to do this comes right back. And I worked with a couple coaches and a couple of really interesting, I would call them guides leading up to this. And there were two really important factors for anyone that listens that has a heart condition and needs some inspiration. The first thing is knowing that you can heal. It's completely possible to heal. It's completely possible for your body to accept new parts that aren't your own. This is not something that I really thought about a whole lot, but I worked with an energy healer going into it. And I spent a lot of time priming my body to accept a new valve and a new aortic root. And it's like, this is part of my body. It's safe, right, and good for it to be in my body. It belongs in my body. It is now my body. My body accepts, and I just over and over, and just programming my body to accept this thing before it even happened. I donated my own blood prior to the surgery. So it was exhausting, but I flew to Montana multiple times to donate my own blood. So I would have it's called an autologous blood donation. So that if I needed a blood transfusion, I was getting my own blood because your body's going to respond to your own blood better than anyone else's.
Interesting. Okay.
And then, and then I just try to get as still as possible leading into it. Jim George, who's a phenomenal therapist and stillness, he's not really a coach, but for lack of a better term, a coach, a guide, had some amazing conversations with me about getting still and stilling the mind and just being. And that helped me a lot. And then once I got out of the surgery, it was like, let's go. So day 1, walk around the hallway. Day 2, walk multiple times around the hallway without stopping. Day 3, walk a mile without stopping. And on those walks, the cardio PT told me, he's like, man, your heart can handle the strain of running, but your chest can't. So he's like, so within a couple weeks, your heart will be healed enough that it could keep up with you running as long as your sternum could. And he's like, so you have the ability to get there if it's up to you, right? And mind you, this is for someone who's young and fit and was already going into this very fit. And so I was like, I'm going to run a mile as soon as possible. So I started training the last week of my cardio PT. Like I'm like 3 weeks in post-surgery in cardio PT. And I'm like, I'm going to run a mile next week. Like I'm going to run a mile next week. And I'm like, mind you, at the time I'm only walking and I'm out of breath walking. I'm like walking and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So 31 days after the surgery, I ran a mile in about 10 and a half minutes. And it was it was a little bit of a I don't know. I don't think that they loved it. They were kind of like, "How are you feeling?" I'm like, "Good." And I'm like, "I'm not stopping. I'm doing this." And they were like, "Okay, well your heart rate's a little high." I'm like, "No, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Like, this is for me." And I did it, and they were like, "Wow, that's pretty crazy." And like they didn't want to like say good job because they're
Mhm.
like, "I hope this guy doesn't die."
Yeah.
Like, they were like, "Oh gosh." But yeah, I ran a mile 31 days afterwards, and that was just honestly to be an example to other people that it's completely possible. You can do it if you set your mind to it, and as long as you're not doing it in a way that's going to compromise your recovery or your, healing, as long as it's something that you believe you can do for yourself, you can do it.
Mm. The word that comes to mind is just resilience.
Mm.
I feel like in this life, we're constantly told what we should do, what we ought to do, what we can't do. For the most part, you grow up as a kid. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a
Right.
professional baseball player. I
Yeah.
want to be a movie star. That's great, And then you get into middle school, and then you get into high school, and then you get into college. It's like, okay, that's what do you actually want to do? I'll go work for Deloitte, go work for,
Yeah. Right.
you know, PwC, go work for one of these big companies. Which, again, nothing wrong with that. But it just reminded me of that because you hear about this so much with people who have these crazy medical complications, and they told you you can't lift anything over 40 pounds. Well, why not? What if you picked up a 45-pound barbell?
Oh my God, I'm gonna die. Yeah.
Yeah, like what?
Yeah.
Is that the weight that's gonna kill you by lifting
Right.
45 pounds? You're never gonna run, you're never gonna run again. You're never gonna do this again. Says who?
Yeah.
Says who? And you have given me a lot of confidence in just following your story
Mm.
and seeing that didn't let those you didn't let what the doctors were telling you or what other people were telling you to do hold you back from living your the fullest human experience possible.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think for myself, there's just been a lot of uncertainty as I still haven't been diagnosed with anything yet.
Tough.
I
Yeah.
go back to the doctor again tomorrow. I was there last week, and it's frustrating. But hearing your resilience, you ran a mile 31 days after having open heart surgery. You're now doing all these amazing things. You're so dialed in to becoming the healthiest version of yourself. I was looking at your post today about, just tracking your data on Whoop, and
Yeah.
it's not it's for nothing other than like you're trying to be able to show up as the best version of you and
Totally.
live as the best live in the most fullest way possible. So kind of backtracking a little bit after you ran that mile, sounds like that was like game on for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went on and, open heart surgery, beginning of the year, same year, you become the freaking David Goggins of putting on events.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
did that spark a trigger in you to like start taking action on some of these things that maybe were in the back of your head, or like, oh, I could do this, or I want to do this, but you've been holding back a little bit?
For sure.
Like, what perspective did the open heart surgery and having this all happen to you, like what perspective did that give you over the past year?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's so much perspective. Man, first off, I feel for you in your situation because the unknown is mentally fatiguing.
Mm.
And so it requires more than anything. We talked about being present earlier. That presence for you is really important because there's a lot of unknowns, and it's really easy for the mind to jump ahead and to try to, problem solve for something that may or may not be the problem. And, your mind can just run endlessly. It's like a projector is putting stuff out there. And I'm just proud of you for how you've adjusted and also become resilient. Like I talk about you a lot, and we have mutual friends, John Hickey and Dr. John.
Mhm.
We are always chatting about you, and you're crushing it. And I'm proud of you because I know how hard it is when you're in that unknown. I mean, there was a time where I knew my condition was bad, but it wasn't bad enough to warrant surgery yet. So then you're kind of in that ticking time bomb of like, how long until I have to have surgery? Like that's a terrible feeling. And so I kind of know what that feels like. But yeah, just keep rocking and keep being present for you. I mean, you're already doing a great job of it. You don't need to hear that, but I see you and I'm proud of you.
Thanks, brother.
For me, coming out of the surgery, re- I really didn't see it as like, oh, I'm a badass, and I'm like I had a Goggins moment
Mhm.
I had a Goggins moment in the hospital. The quick story of that is I was on painkillers 4 days after the surgery. You're still on pretty heavy painkillers, and I was getting terrible night sweats. Like I was like shivering uncontrollably, which really hurts when your sternum's been split open. And I was like, I have to stop shivering. Like, what's going on? And they're like, we think you're having a reaction to the drugs, to the narcotics.
Mhm.
I'm like, well, then take me off. And they're like, "Sure, it's probably gonna hurt." You know, and I'm like, yeah, I know. So I come off the painkillers, and uh, I've sweat. having these crazy fevers. I've sweat through the EKG strips. There's like all the
Oh,
leads.
yeah, yeah.
I've sweat those off already twice in one night.
Sheesh.
Right, and it's not even midnight. And the nurse comes in. I'm shivering uncontrollably. I'm angry. And she's like, I think you have runaway pain. That's the term they use is runaway pain, like where the pain is so bad, like you're just. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, well, like, can you do anything? She's like, I can give you a couple Tylenol. So I took a couple Tylenol, sweat through the leads 2 more times. At 4 a.m., I got up and I was like, I'm done with this. Like I'm done. Whatever's happening right now, the fever, I'm done. I took a shower which is like weird to do, like I just had an open heart surgery. So I took a shower in my little hospital room, got dressed, and I just sat in the bed with one little blanket over me. My room was freezing, but I didn't want to sweat anymore. I was like, I'm done with the
Mhm.
fever. Whatever's happening, it's over. And I just sat there and I just waited for the sun to come up. And this is in the winter, so the sun doesn't come till like 7:50 or 8 a.m. And I just sat there in the darkness for hours waiting for the sun to come up. And that was my pain cave moment where I'm just like, I'm in it and I'm mentally going to overcome all of this right now. And the sun came up behind the mountains and it was the most glorious sunrise of my entire life. And I went home that day and it was awesome. Like it was just like so ridiculous. But the funny part was the cardiologist came in and was like, they didn't give you ibuprofen? And I'm like, no. And they're like, they said I couldn't have it. And they're like, that's for a different surgery. You can totally have ibuprofen. That would stop the fevers. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So it was completely unnecessary. Like it's just the nurse screwed up. Uh, but it gave me a beautiful pain cave moment where I was able to like overcome. And that was like that was the confidence unlock more than the running the mile. That night where I just chose to like you literally like it's like the you can't hurt me. Like I'm in so much pain right now. You can't hurt me more than this. And I'm just gonna forge through this. So I go back to that often. Anytime I feel uncomfortable, I'm like, dude, this is nothing compared to, having the shivers and a fever when your chest has been cracked open. But how I've leveraged that going forward is I'm extremely grateful that I get to live this life and I get to do these things. And I think it's my um it's I'm so lucky. I'm required to live the best life I possibly can. I'm required to be an example to other people, and I'm required to share all the information that I get on my journey. So there's no gatekeeping. There's no, you know, download book to, learn my secrets, my tricks. Like there's no ebook. It's as I learn stuff, I'm going to put it out there. If you want to follow along, great. I'm so lucky, and that motivates me like none other to like go as hard as I possibly can. And again, go as hard as I can without compromising my health.
Mm.
So it's like I'm learning what my body responds to, how to recover properly, how to use these different tools. Like the wellness toolkit that I've been thinking about is like, what is that toolkit for me? These are the tools that get me, from this point to this point very quickly, and I can use those tools to get a desired outcome. I clearly need 10 hours of sleep. Okay, here are my tools to get 10 hours of sleep. I clearly need better nutrition and more energy and more carbohydrates for the thing I'm doing. Here's how I do that. Like that's how I'm thinking about everything. And I'm so motivated to one, reach more people with the message of one, resilience, but two, like just overcoming whatever your roadblock is, whether that's a relationship or it's a job that you need to leave, or it's a job you need a, a business you need to start, or maybe it's a surgery, maybe it's losing weight. Like there's a lot of things that people have roadblocks that they're like very stuck on, and that thing is hanging them up. And I feel like my mission right now is, because I'm this lucky guy who gets to live life and gets to live life as intensely as I do, it's my job to make sure that people have the tools to do the same thing I'm doing. And it's up to them whether or not they want to, actually execute on it, but at least put it out there. So that's kind of where my mindset is right now.
What are some of the signals that you look for that, not that you look for, but what are some of the signals that for you are like, okay, I need to slow down a little bit here?
Oh man. The first one, it would just be how impatient I am. I have a ton of patience when I've slept and when I'm spiritually grounded and when I'm abundant and when I'm grateful. And when I start getting really impatient with people and I'm like, come on, like, oh, it's all about me now. Like I'm the center of the universe. I need to slow down. That's always the first one. I think the next one is I recognize, like, if I'm not thinking clearly because I'm tired, like that means you need to slow down everywhere. Like you're doing way too much. You're processing too much information. You got to slow down. You got to sleep more. And it'll show up. Like you'll be like, why did I do this goofy thing? Like why didn't I think about that? Like because you're exhausted, dude. Like that's why. So you got to take care of yourself. But the biggest signal for me is almost always in my mind. It's I get impatient. I get frustrated more easily. I think that people are, not hearing me or not respecting me, and that's not the case at all. It's literally that I'm probably tired and I'm being a poor communicator, and people are giving me back what I'm putting out. It's very much what that is.
Yeah. Having those signals that you can look for is important, I think, too. And just having a deep sense of self-awareness and asking yourself, well, why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
I had a moment the other day where my roommate had called me out for just not being present and just seeming like I was out of it, or just not being like the human that I want to be. And, I appreciate him for that. And I think having those people in your life are really important, who are going to call you out when you're not currently operating at your best.
Yeah.
And for me, I was trying to justify it. I was like, no, like you don't understand. Like I'm going to Tanzania next month. I got to do this. I got to do all this stuff. And yes, I do have to do all this stuff, but it shouldn't give you an excuse to like be a bad person or like run yourself into the ground.
Yeah, for sure. That running yourself into the ground is such a tricky balance of like, it's such a tricky balance because when you want to do a lot and you want to be like aggressive in your schedule and you want to be highly productive or whatever those things are that you want to accomplish, then you're going to sacrifice one of two things. You're going to probably sacrifice your sleep and your personal recovery, or you're going to sacrifice your relationships. Almost always. Those are the two things that you're going to sacrifice. Because there's not an allowance for both of those things. Both of those things like require a fair amount of you giving. And if you're not giving to either of those things, then one of them is going to suffer. Like if you're more irritable, then your relationships are going to suffer. If you're giving in to your relationships and you're doing all this stuff for yourself, then your personal time, you're being grounded and being present and being recovered is going to suffer. Those are the two things I think are kind of always pushing and pulling. And Jesse Itzler's talked about this before, which I love. Like I'm going out of balance. Like I'm going ham for 6 weeks. Expect me to not be like the best communicator with you or the most available that I've ever been, because I'm going all in on this other thing. I love that energy. But as long as you define an in point and an out point
Mm.
of like in and out. And at this point, I'm done. And I've been starting to play with that more and more. Last fall is the first time I feel like I really actually intentionally did it. I was like, I recognize like I have a 6-week run. It's where we actually hung out, but
Mm-hmm.
I was in New York in September, end of September, and then I had a series of events, including Running Man and that other New York event that you and I were at together. And I was like, I got 6 weeks straight of travel. It's a crazy sprint, and you're not going to hear from me. Like, you're not going to hear much from me. I'm not super available. So before that, I took 10 days and I went home and hung out with my family for 10 days and just slept and didn't do much and hung out.
Mm.
And then I went into that and I just charged through it, and it felt amazing. Like, when I was done, I was actually sad because I was like, oh man, I wish there was more. Like, okay, now it's time to go rest again, you know?
Mm.
So I think that you can create, if you're intentional about it, you can create the right amount of time for you where it's like, I can go hard for this amount of time. And then you just have to, like anything, hold to your boundary or hold to your commitment to yourself that you're going to take that decompression time.
Mm. That's good. I did want to ask you, what role has cold plunging played with
Ooh.
everything that's going on in your life too? Because I cold plunged almost every day,
Yeah.
most days, at least 4 or 5 times a week. And for the first few months, after post surgery, I wasn't allowed to. I wasn't allowed to cold plunge.
Yeah. What did they say? I'm curious. What did they say? Like, did you ask them about this? Like,
So they didn't want. I wasn't allowed to sauna. I wasn't allowed to cold plunge.
And this was heart rate elevation.
Heart rate elevation, exactly. Right. So they didn't. I already have a low resting heart rate.
Okay.
Of like 40.
Whoa.
And so they were like, "We don't want you cold plunging because it could bring your heart rate down too low."
Okay.
But at the same time, I did have the surgery, so I do have the incision, and I was out in Denver in like October, which was still like a couple months post-op, and yeah. I was like, oh, I think my scar's fully healed by then, and it wasn't, and like the sauna caused it to. Just knocked my mic away. Sauna caused it to like open up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, guess I shouldn't have done that. But they didn't. It was mostly like they didn't want the incision to get infected for a while through like sweat or going in pools or cold plunges or whatever. But the main thing was like they didn't want the heart rate elevation.
What heart rate did they want? What was your max heart rate that they advised immediately after that? Do you remember?
They said like they didn't want it going anything above like a zone 2 effort. So like
so that's like
140.
Yeah.
And
wow.
Yeah. So
okay.
You can get that high if you're in the sauna for a decent amount of time. Like,
yeah. Well, the way we sauna.
The way we sauna.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, interesting. Yeah. And so, are you cold plunging now?
I am. I did a dip before we came over here.
Hey, I love it. Amazing. And sauna now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All the things.
Well, for me, it was an interesting road. Did you feel like your doctor understood what you were asking about the cold plunge and sauna? Like, do they understand the practice that you're in? Or are they kind of like, don't get in a pool?
They didn't even. This was like when I was in the hospital, like as I was getting like instructions for like discharge and things like that.
Yeah.
And I don't even think they knew that I was like into it. I don't think they knew that it was that big of a part of my life.
I found that to be so interesting. Like, I asked multiple doctors about it, and they're like, they didn't know what. Like they I think they referenced like a sports ice bath.
Yeah.
From like the 80s. I think that's like where their mind goes.
Mm-hmm.
That was really strange to me. And what I realized was like I've done way more research on cold exposure than they have no clue what's going on.
Yeah.
Is in my experience. And I'm not saying that doctors, I'm not generalizing that. I'm just saying that doctors that I interacted with had no clue what's going on to you biologically, neurochemically, when you're in the plunge or in an ice bath. And I found that to be really strange and kind of disheartening because I was like, again, it's like the weightlifting thing. Like, yo, don't lift more than 40 pounds.
Mhm.
Why? Well, we don't want, basically what they don't want is they don't want there to be this intravascular pressure, right? Because that could blow out the aneurysm and then you die. You bleed out. So, like, well, I'm really fit though. So at what point am I going to feel that vascular pressure? Like, is it 65 pounds? Is it 85 pounds? Is it 125 pounds? Like, and mind you, I just had a PR in bench like a couple days before they told me I couldn't lift more. And I was like, here's the thing, doc. I just hit 205 and I'm feeling pretty good. I'm like, he's like, yeah, you're not doing that again.
Are they letting you, or do you barbell bench press?
I do now. Yeah.
Okay. That's one thing I have the wire that goes from, I have the defibrillator in.
Yeah.
So like I have a wire that goes like across my breastplate and then up through my heart.
Right.
And I was surfing in Malibu in November and there came a point after like an hour of surfing where it just hurt so bad.
Laying on it.
Right. Because the wire connects like right here at like the center of my sternum and then comes up here. So for me, I'm just like, man, like I don't want to drop like, if I ever get back to like 225 plus or
Put
whatever.
one of those little foam pads.
One of those little foam pads. I'm like, man, I think I might just dumbbell
guy,
kettlebell and all
that.
that.
For sure. Yeah, that's super interesting. Man, having your sternum split open is so hard to come back. So when they cut it open,
dude, you got to create your scar's crazy.
For people,
there you go. There you go for the people on YouTube. There you go.
Thing, but there's a chunk of muscle here that got
those abs.
Yeah, the chunk of muscle. This should be better, but talking about health over here, like
bulking season.
Yeah, skinny bulking season. We're in the early phases.
Yeah.
When they split it, there's a little chunk of muscle that like got detached from where it used to be.
Yep.
And so now like when I flex, like you can see like it kind of like cuts in.
Yeah.
There's like this little striation, little strand of muscle that it like reattached closer in, and it is so weak. It hurts so bad. So like I have to warm up with like a bar, like just the bar, like 3 rounds of just warming up. And then like really gently get into it. And then once it's warmed up, I can actually move some weight again. But man, that's the only real problem I had was like this little muscle, and I would tweak it. I'd pull it benching or doing flies. And then for like 2 weeks, it would just be like a needle in my chest. And it's just this little muscle that didn't reattach the same way that everything else did. Oh man, that was brutal. But yeah, I just surfed for the first time not that long ago. I took a really long time off, way too long to be out of the water. And I had to quit surfing before the surgery because I couldn't breathe because of the whole valve failing. You get this thing called the aortic cough. In my circumstance, where like you have you can't breathe, and it's because your aorta is not like functioning properly.
Jeez.
And so the pressure of laying on my chest when I'm paddling. I remember the last time I surfed, I was actually out with Kevin Wathy.
I don't.
Okay. I was out with Kevin. I thought maybe you guys were friends. Kevin and I were out, and there weren't even big waves, but I was like, this wave's going to kill me. Every single wave, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And I would do like the reset breath. I'd be like, wave with it. And then I'd be like, duck dive. Trying to just calm myself down and like doing the physiological sigh, like in between every single wave.
Yeah.
And I actually surfed better because I didn't feel like I had the lung capacity to take as many waves as I normally would. So I took like 1 out of 3 that I would typically charge in on. And I like really picked my spots, but I caught like every wave I went for because I was like, I don't want to drown out here because I don't think I can breathe. Like if I get hit by multiple waves, I don't think I'm gonna be able to breathe. And like I was really worried about drowning. And I was like, I'm done. That was a great day. I'm done surfing. And then I had the surgery a couple months later. But anyway, I'm gonna get back out there more now.
Love it. What is one thing that you want to, if we were to sit here again on January, what's today, 17th? If we were to sit here on January 17th, 2025, what's one thing that you would want to tell me that you accomplished this year?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. And I have a lot of personal goals. I've done a lot of sort of mapping of the year. And something that's sort of shown up for me recently is um, impacting kids that are sick, um, and helping kids feel strong and helping kids have this belief that they're going to heal. I think the belief that you're going to overcome hardship is so important and so underrepresented. When you think about Hollywood movies, when you think about YouTube, when you think about what's on TikTok, there's really not much in terms of who we look up to, characters that are showcasing resilience in a positive light, and they're showcasing like this belief that you're going to overcome. We see a lot of stories about like underdogs, and we see a lot of stories about people, through the lens of sports or through the lens of vengeance, where you get even, you get back, the good guy wins. But there's not a lot of stories. We don't really like make heroes out of people that just overcome hardship. And I think what I want to do, I think my mission this year is to explore that idea and then figure out how to impact people that don't have access to that message. I had access to that message through my upbringing, through my faith, and then through the media and the content that I consumed. It gave me this belief that like I can overcome. Some people, aren't going to have the prompt to find that. And so I'm really interested in, and I don't think this is necessarily me being like, I'm not the hero here, but it's figuring out like, what is that thing? Maybe it's a children's book, or maybe it's, maybe it's someone else's story that is worth sharing, but I'm really interested in that. And that's the thing that I'm really curious about. And my goal is to explore that through the year and hopefully impact people's lives, whether they're young or old, that they can overcome hardship.
I love that. Goes so much deeper than I want to run a 200-mile race this year.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to. I am pushing myself. I'm running my first my first marathon in March.
Let's go. Which one are you doing?
I'm doing the LA Marathon.
Heck yeah.
And then I plan on doing I'm going to try to do an ultra at Running Man. So
let's go.
That's my. I'm getting into it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love that too, because knowing you, it's to prove something to yourself for sure, but it's also, life is all about collecting experiences. And you mentioned Jesse Itzler. He's a man I very much look up to, and building your life resume. And you learn things and you grow through these things, and you add them to your toolkit and your tool belt that you're able to deploy in certain areas. But it's all centered around being the best version of you, so that you can also pour into others, leave a lasting legacy. And when Gravedigger calls your name, you can say,
yeah,
boom, I did all that I could.
Totally.
So I know that excites me for you, because I know how much growth and like what you can learn from that. But I love how you led with thinking about what can I give versus like what can I like achieve.
I feel like I won the lottery right now. I have a great job with an awesome company that positively impacts people's lives. I mean, it's crazy. In 2022, when I had my little ice bath company, in 1 year, I got about 1,200 people through ice baths, guided experience. And that was like, for me, that was that meant something to me. That was like huge. This last weekend in Miami, we had over 1,200 people in our cold plunges in one weekend. That's more than a 10x, right? Like that's insane. That's the opportunity that Plunge has given me, and then in turn, I bring this passion and desire to get people in there at our events, and so that's been amazing. I won the lottery with this work opportunity that is really greatly balanced with my passions and my what I feel like is my purpose. So now I think it's my job to like really dial in on like, how do I give back and like in a meaningful way that's true to my own experience, as a kid that had heart surgery and then grew up knowing that it was going to happen again. I always had this kind of fatalist like mentality. Like as I'm going back and looking, like, man, there's like so many times where I was like, oh, I'm going to die. Like, that's kind of like why I was a party boy, I think too, is I was like, well, I'm going to die eventually. Like I'm going to have heart surgery anyway. Then it's all going to be over,
Right.
And then when it finally showed up, it was like, oh man, I want to live so much more, So, yeah, I'm excited about it. How about you? I'm curious for you. The same question. I mean, you have a lot coming up. You're going to Africa, which that's, by the way, that's on my list. Kilo is on my list. I'm nervous about it. Like I wanted to go with you. I think we talked about that briefly. I'm not timing. I can't quite make it
Yeah,
work. But
it's a commitment. It's for sure a commitment. You talk about like boom, like I'm going ghost mode for like a couple weeks, or
Right.
I'm tuning
Yeah.
out. Like that for me is like the next 2 weeks. I realize like I leave February 2nd. I'm staying there for the whole month. So I'll be there February. I get to Tanzania ironically on my 25th birthday.
Wow.
I'll get to Tanzania, and then I'll be there until we'll do Kilimanjaro, but then I'm gonna volunteer there,
So cool.
stay there, work there, and just immerse myself in that culture for a month. So spending all of February in Tanzania. I'm gonna be there for the Kilimanjaro marathon.
Wow.
I'm not gonna run it. I think I'm gonna run the 5K.
So what is the Kilimanjaro marathon?
It's just it's just any other. It's just a marathon.
But
it's not.
it's not up the
It's not
mountain.
up. No, it's not
Yeah,
up the mountain.
cool.
It's just it's near. It's near there.
Very cool.
So that'll be an amazing experience. Tanzania has some of the best runners in the world,
Right.
and so I'm looking forward to going there and documenting some of that and
So sick.
being there for that. But I set some goals for myself this year. One of them being like the main area of focus for my life this year is I bucketed my life into 4 areas, and that's personal, professional, health, and relationship.
Mm.
And I think that fourth one, relationship, is the thing that I'm really, really focused on. I want to learn how to better serve in my relationships. Like I want to give more than like take
Mhm.
within them. I made it a goal for myself for every single day to meet one new person, to introduce myself to one new person. I think very much like I realized this when we were in New York. When I was in New York, it's like there's thousands of people that you're passing every day, and nobody wants to make eye contact with anybody. Nobody wants to talk. Like, and so for me, I'm like, whether it's at the gym, co-working space, grocery store, whatever, try to introduce myself to one new person.
That's cool.
Every day. And if I can do that, you just it's not so much like, oh, I need to meet all these new people, but it's just you never know like the impact that like somebody could have on your life, or you never know the impact that you could have on somebody else's life.
Just caring.
Just caring, right?
Just caring enough to say hi.
Exactly.
Like letting people be seen.
Yeah.
Man, what a gift.
What a gift. So I also I set like a goal for myself. I want to visit. I want to spend meaningful time in 6 new states.
Ooh.
And I want to travel to 2 new countries this year.
That's good.
And so I have one that I'll be going to next month, and I think I'm thinking Greece in September. A friend of mine's organizing a trip there.
Wonderful. That's awesome.
But every time I travel, every time I go to these new places, I learn so much, and it gives me such a new perspective. But I'm in a point right now where I look at myself and the things that I do, and creating content, throwing events, building a startup. I want to continue to align all of these things. I want to share more about my human experience and like the realness behind it. I want to.
You're good, and you're already good at that, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I want to. I feel like I have this opportunity to be like a leader in like from like in the spiritual space as well.
Agree.
And it's been uncomfortable to lean into that at times, but the more and more I do lean into it and talk about it, the better reception that I get. And so for me, I really want to look back on this year and say like I gave more than I took. That's
man.
And it's, I don't know if it's not like really like a quantifiable thing. It's not like I ran a marathon in a certain time.
It's your own level of consciousness though.
Exactly.
Your awareness of how much you are giving.
Mm-hmm. So it's
beautiful. It's inspiring. And I agree on the spiritual leadership side too. Mm-hmm. Keep doing it. It's great. It's really powerful, and it reaches people even if they don't, even if they don't say anything. It's great to see someone who cares about their spiritual health. Man, that is, and when you hit a point where all of your other modalities, when your cold plunges or your saunas or your meditation or whatever those things are, Those are all amazing tools, right?
Mm.
But they are physical modalities. They're not necessarily spiritual modalities. Maybe meditation is. And that will give you the opportunity to like then go deeper.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes you hit a point where it's like you just gotta straight up pray.
Yeah.
You gotta check in. And it's great to see that other people are publicly unashamed of doing that. That's awesome.
Thank you, brother. Before I let you go here, I have to ask you, this is the Pure Ambition podcast. So I ask all my guests, when you hear those two words together, pure ambition, how do they apply to you, your daily life? What does it mean when you hear that?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's consciously or intentionally giving all you've got to the thing that you care about the most.
Ooh,
I think that's it.
that's it.
Yeah.
Bro, I just want to say thank you
Dude, thank you.
for the person that you are.
Oh, I'm just excited to be here. Yeah.
Dude, like seriously, I'm so grateful. And when I came across your content, or it might have been Dr. John
I think it was Dr. John
who said, "Hey, like you got to follow my other buddy Dom."
Yeah, he said the same thing to me. Yeah.
And you know, just people, you get introduced to people all the time. You meet them once at somewhere. It's like, do you actually stay in touch with them or whatnot? And you know, from the time that we met in person, and I appreciated all your kind messages and support when I was in the hospital and post-op and all that. It really meant a lot to me. And we have this shared connection now.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I just want to say, like, I appreciate that every time I talk to you, you care so deeply, and then you show up with great intention with everything you do. So that's been like my biggest takeaway from spending time with you, is just like be intentional and be that arm of support for whoever may need it. So I just want to say thank you, bro.
Well,
and
yeah,
I got a lot of love for you.
Yeah, likewise, much love. And I've just been inspired by your journey, and I'm really glad. Thank you for having me in and taking the time. I think we could talk about this kind of stuff forever, but
Yeah.
it's just it's really appreciated on my side, and it's awesome to see that you've so quickly adapted, you know, to the challenges that you've had. I love how you just went right into mobility, and then now you're strength training. Like, you're just like, yes, it's a little shift in like what you thought was your thing maybe, but you've so quickly just been like, oh, I'm going to adapt to this. And that adaptability is so inspiring to me. So just keep it rocking, man.
Thank you, brother.
Heck yeah.
All right. If people want to connect with you, they want to learn more about what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. My Instagram is lifexdom. You say life by Dom, but it's lifexdom. And I do experiences and community at Plunge. So check out at Plunge on Instagram or plunge.com.
Love it, brother. Thank you for the man that you are. And I'm excited to see all that you're going to accomplish this year and in this life.
Heck yeah. I'm excited our next check-in.
Much love, bro.
All right.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. I wanted to give you all a heads up too that I launched a free community on the Upspace app where you can join, ask me questions, connect with like-minded individuals, follow my 4-week running and strength training program that has some dedicated mobility sessions in there as well, so that we can all optimize our health and fitness together. So if you're interested, head over to the App Store, download the Upspace app, and join the Pure Ambition community today. Love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.